This is the Neo Show, where the minds shaping tomorrow speak today. Brought to you by Neo, the browser redefining what AI can do for you. Phil, if you could just give a quick and sort of brief introduction, why someone might want to listen if they don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, first, hi, everyone. I'm Phil Pergola. I'm the CEO of CloudZero. CloudZero is a B2B software company. What we do is we help companies get visibility into what drives their public cloud data and AI spend. And with that visibility, take an engineering-led approach to not only optimizing that spend, but improving their unit economics. And so it's great to be here today.
Hey, Phil. Good to see you again. And we all know that there are plenty of companies doing similar things. There are a few generations of such companies, right? Starting from when AWS first came out, you were the, early pioneer of that generation as well. What is the new thing with CloudZero? Because, sounds like we have been, as an industry, we have had many generations of companies looking at a cloud spend, years after years. Anything new?
Yeah. So Howie, it's as you mentioned, so I've been in the public cloud since 2017, and the earliest days of the public cloud, even going back to like 2008. I've been helping companies in this area, and so what you've seen for me, focusing the last 8 years, what I've seen is sort of a shift that's happening, and so a couple of shifts that are happening. One is companies look to optimize their cloud infrastructure, primarily focusing on things like compute network storage. That's really evolved into more of the platform area. First and foremost, you've seen the explosion of like these database clouds, like think the MongoDBs, the Snowflakes, the Databricks of the world. Now you're seeing the model companies out in the cloud, and those are taking different shapes. What you see like the OpenAIs, the Anthropics of the world, or you see companies like the CoreWeaves of the world that are like the Neo clouds hosting GPUs. You're starting to see a lot of focus there. And what also happens is that through each generation, the problems of the old generation actually don't really go away. So all of the same challenges people had with like making sure they're using the same compute network storage, how you allocate like shared costs or manage multi-tenant costs, that doesn't go away. Then you see something like Kubernetes come out, it just makes it harder. Now you're seeing kind of the new clouds. So the world is getting more complex, but the newest things have been, the AI clouds. And then before that, the explosion of data. And that data explosion will continue because as many of us know, much of what we're doing with AI isn't possible without great data.
Okay, that's very interesting. Now, perhaps we could just touch real quick. Why did you join CloudZero originally?
Yes. So I joined CloudZero in November of 2021. And at that point in time, I had been an executive at multiple B2B SaaS companies. I had been in the infrastructure space for much of my career. And I was really looking at kind of like, what's next. And I knew that I wanted to continue to focus on infrastructure as an area. Things like some people like to say that, the picks and the shovels, focusing on that area. And so that was, one thing. And I continued to see this challenge, having been in that space for 4 years. I continued to see the challenges getting larger and larger. Just to put some context around that, companies this year will spend about $700 to $800 billion in the public cloud across platform infrastructure as SaaS. When I was taking the job, back then, it was less, but about 30% of that is waste. And if you apply 30% to $700 to $800 billion, it's greater than the GDP for most nations in the world. So it's not insignificant. And the forecast is that companies are going to spend about $2 trillion over the coming years by about 2030. And so this problem is only getting harder. And as someone who has had a career in working for startups that eventually went on to have successful exits, there's a huge market opportunity that exists, and I was really excited to be the CEO of a company attacking this big market opportunity.
Wow, this is I knew the data is going to be it's a big number. I didn't realize 30% of the 700 billion. Let me ask you a tough question then. if I just zoom out a little bit, right? I would naturally think even if you save not just 1%, 0.1%, or maybe even 0.01% of that 700 billion is a gigantic number. My suspicion is your revenue is not at that level. Why? Why, you're not even saving, why this is such a, no-brainer story. Everyone says, hey, Phil, just to do it, yesterday.
Yeah, so it's a good question. We spend a lot of time looking at a very simple formula, and it's very simple on its premise, which is if we can get 10% of the service addressable market, or about 5% of the total addressable market, and we can convince companies to pay us 1% of that spend to help them manage it, that's $1 billion revenue company, right? So, and if you look at the savings that we deliver our customers, oftentimes it's 20, 30, 40%, right? So, the fee certainly justified by the outcome. And so, so that's sort of like one perspective. I think when you look at it through kind of the challenges, one of the things that we are really focused on is making sure companies understand that being efficient with how they build software in the cloud is not competitive with innovation, right? And so for many companies, it's, where do they want to focus their, time and energy? What does good enough, look like? In a vacuum, each of the large hyperscalers, will attempt to provide value, to their customers through free tools, through consulting services, what have you. The reality is that most companies who are architecting or building an application in the cloud today are doing it across cloud providers. Maybe they have a primary, hyperscaler that they use for their infrastructure platform. But very quickly, as you start to layer in security, databases, you start to think of the management tools like the Datadogs, the things like that. It quickly becomes a multi-cloud problem. And then the other piece that I think is really missing, which right now, I think we're still in the early adopter stage, is starting to tie the unit economics of the business back to that spend. So the problem right now is that people look at the bill and they think like, wow, I'm spending a lot of money. I'm spending millions of dollars in the cloud. That's a bad thing. How do we reduce our bill? Well, the reality is if you're a company like DoorDash doing deliveries, if your cloud bill goes up because you have more deliveries, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If you're a public company and your revenue doubles and your cloud spend triples, that might be a bad thing. But on the flip side, if you see a 25% increase in your revenue year over year and a 5% increase in your cloud, that might be a very healthy thing, right? And so what companies are starting to understand that it is possible with solutions like CloudZero to actually tie the spend, which is primarily being driven by their business, customers consuming products, features, transactions, and their engineering decisions. It's possible to tie all of that back to the unit economics of their business now with solutions like CloudZero. And then what they can understand is the difference between the healthy decisions and the unhealthy decisions. And so that engineers, as they're building code, as they're building applications, have the context that they need to make good decisions. And oh, by the way, just like we're building, secure software and performance software, building efficient software, through the lens of spend is actually a good thing. And that's what good innovative companies do. And it's not at the expense of pace of innovation. And you can often use these unit metrics as a simple way to govern that. So you can empower engineering teams to move really fast, but at the same time, make sure that the decisions that they're making are in line with your business goals.
Cool. Thank you for all the, the background information. Axel and I started this show, mostly to bring executives, founders like yourself to our audience to talk about one topic, which is AI. For one thing, we actually have an AI native browser called Neo. I don't know you get a chance to install it and then try it.
I did. I actually, I have a really big problem, Howie. I was trying to figure out how I get my family of 5 to Orlando, Florida for Thanksgiving to go visit my family and down there. And I actually was using Neo and, and exploring different ways that we might be able to get down there in a cost-effective way. So I did have some time to explore Neo.
Wow. Okay. So you're a kind of a powered user now. Wow.
Continue. That's my hope.
continue to use that way. Once we have, 1 billion users, we will need CloudZero to optimize our backend costs.
Yeah, that's right.
So we will collaborate. So coming back to this AI, right? You are the CEO of a company. What does the AI mean to you? Can you give us some idea what's going on?
Yeah. When I think about what AI means to me, I can look at it through the lens of like the typical, B2B SaaS company, and then there's sort of a nuance that's a bit unique to our business. So first and foremost, what AI means to us is we're looking at how does AI impact the productivity of our employees, and we're a fast-growing organization. We are hiring lots of people. Our focus is really around how do we increase the productivity of the people that we're bringing on by giving them, AI. So what does that look like? We're a software company, so that could be our engineers using different co-pilots. It could be our salespeople. Like, for example, if I am meeting with a prospect, one of my sales executives asked me to meet with a prospect, the good sales reps will use generative AI to prepare a briefing for me that used to require a lot of manual effort on them, doing research, pulling together information from our internal data sources. Now they do that in an instant. And then I get a really nice PDF, which is like, here's everything I need to know before I meet with this prospect. So our pre-sales teams, our post-sales teams, our customer success teams, like all of them are using generative AI. A second lens is how do we use AI inside of our product? And when we think about AI, we think about it both in the context of so more traditional AI like machine learning, as well as some of the more forward generative AI use cases. And so we think about like how are we using AI in our product? So on one side, like for example, we have time series data. So we're doing things like anomaly detection would be like a simple use case. Using AI to help customers like forecast what their future cloud spend is going to be. But also things like instead of interacting with a traditional like data explorer or BI tool, having a natural language conversation about what drove our cloud spend to increase, right? And so we're embedding AI into our product in lots of different ways, both from a user experience perspective, but also behind the scenes in terms of things like MCP servers, things like that. So that's embedding AI in the product. So the first use case is productivity of the team. Second use case is embedded in the product for the benefit of our customers. And then the third use case for us is that our customers, because of the nature of what we do, they are consuming AI. Associated with that, they are driving up, the number of tokens that they are consuming. They are driving up the associated spend. And through that, we're helping them understand the difference between healthy AI spend and unhealthy AI spend. The reality is that most companies right now, most businesses, they're not looking to reduce their AI spend. If anything, they're getting pressure from their boards to invest more in AI, in which case the bills are going to increase. But what companies are starting to understand is it's important to understand which of those AI investments have some type of return and which ones do not, and how do they reallocate their investments to either try new experiments and or invest in the things that are working. And so we have this third category.
Actually, can you double click on this? We actually have a question from the audience related to this, but you probably can answer the question together. The question is, what exactly do you mean by provide a saving, to, your user, right? Cloud cost intelligence, for you and me, we know all day long, but, for the audience who never touched this topic, what does that mean? What exactly do you do? I think you were talking about the AI, let's use that as example.
Yeah. So examples of helping our customers from a value perspective in terms of reducing their spend and I'll use some AI examples as well. So first and foremost, one of our typical customers, they might have tens, hundreds, thousands of software engineers, all of whom are interacting with the cloud, with data, with AI, and they will oftentimes spin up these resources that are like a utility. And so for the non-technical folks, think of it as you enter a room and you turn the lights on. And then when you leave the room, the lights are still running. Okay. So for some of our customers, that activity of turning the lights on, that might cost them tens of thousands of dollars a day. which is significantly more than what running a light, in a typical room might cost. And so one engineer might make a decision that costs tens of thousands of dollars a day, and those resources might be the equivalent of leaving the lights on overnight. And we just need to shut those resources down. Or in other cases, using AI as an example, some models cost 10 times more than other models. And so understanding the cost profile and then tying it back to the business might help better inform which models they might want to use for a particular use case, right? So again, our customers are primarily businesses. Profitability matters. Not all of them are profitable, but making sure they have healthy unit economics. So for example, again, if you're like a DoorDash, the cost per delivery, if you're someone like an Uber, a cost per ride, if those economics don't make sense, then their businesses don't make sense. And so it's really important that companies are building a solid business that can be sustainable, and we're helping them get the data, to understand that they're doing that. And so through both visibility as well as uncovering things like you've left the lights on, we're helping our customers not only save money, but be more efficient.
So that's a very good analogy, turning the lights on. I've seen it firsthand, for, almost 2 decades of leveraging the cloud here and there. I saw engineer all the time, right? You spin up a virtual machine and then you forgot, right? So this happens all the time. And then you give the example that, hey, AI, some model may cost more or less, that you give visibility. Have you seen that being, in the real practice? Have you seen that, for real, you go to a customers, you point out this, and then people say, wow, I'm going to save a lot of money. Or this is the future, right? Because people are going to use more and more AI. You are thinking about how to, work on the product to give that visibility. Is that like a here and a now, or this is like more futuristic?
Yeah. So what's here and now, right now, and I've seen this play out over the last decade, and this is not unique to, what I'm about to describe is not unique to the cloud. It's that a really big bill shows up, right? So, what's happening now, and what has happened in my experience over the past decade, is at some point in time, a really big bill shows up, right? So, I'll just use my own business as an example. So we're doing experimentation with lots of AI providers. I was experimenting with Neo recently. We've got we work with Anthropic, we work with OpenAI. We're experimenting with some others. We're experimenting with different data providers. One day, finance gets a bill and says, "Whoa, where did that $10,000 bill come from? I wasn't expecting that." And then what happens is they end up going to the engineering teams and they end up saying, "Hey, what happened there? I was caught by surprise. Is that going to continue? Is that something we need to plan for?" And then those are sort of the questions that start happening. With a lot of the consumption of AI, right now we're still in the early days. I was actually talking with someone yesterday, and they had commented that they had used 100 billion tokens. And I asked a very simple question. I said, "How much did that cost? How much did 100 billion tokens cost you? Is it thousands a month? Is it tens of thousands a month? Is it hundreds of thousands a month?" And this person was like, "No, it's costing our company tens of thousands a month." And I'm like, "Oh, is anyone starting to now pay attention because you're spending tens of thousands of dollars a month on something?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, totally." When it went from thousands to tens of thousands, we started getting phone calls, right? Which is like, "Hey, what's going on with this bill?" And so oftentimes what happens is you see the bill surprise being the thing. And what happens oftentimes is that the finance teams, they will all of a sudden say, "Whoa, hold on a sec. We got to slow this thing down." And then what happens is the innovation slows down, right? And that's not good for the company because nobody wants their innovation to slow down. It's not good for the the vendor, whether it's an OpenAI vendor or a cloud vendor, or an AI vendor, a cloud vendor, a data vendor. It's not good for them because they're not getting revenue. It's not good for the end customer who is the beneficiary of that innovation. Nobody wins when that slowdown happens. So part of our mission is to really eliminate the bill surprise and eliminate what I call the trough of innovation, which is that period of trying to get control of the bill, and then getting back to a point where companies feel like they have good governance around it and they can continue to invest with confidence. Because inevitably they always get there and they always continue to invest. But we need to try and eliminate this trough of innovation. We need to try and eliminate the bill surprise.
Now, you mentioned that we're just in the early days, and you had also referenced that, sort of the challenges in this space have been the same for many years. So I'm wondering, as AI is innovating and perhaps there's new applications of it, what sort of challenges do you think will be better addressed in the future?
Are you talking like general, like what kind of challenges? Yeah.
Specifically around the application of AI in your space.
Yeah. Yeah, I think around the application of AI in our space. So one thing I want your audience to kind of keep in mind is that the cheaper the unit economics that businesses can achieve, the cheaper the products and services they can provide to their end customers will be, right? So if I'm, for example, if you think about, if you go out to eat and you get some food and you swipe your credit card and you use one of those processing machines, whether it's from someone like Toast or NCR or Clover, there's a cost for that. There's a cost per transaction that is actually like happening there. That money is then charged back, with some kind of profit back to the restaurant that you're at. And then all that's passed along to the consumer, right? So I think at a macro level, like we're trying to work with our customers to help them be efficient so that they continue to not only provide products and services at kind of a fair price to their customers, but more importantly, if they're efficient, then they have capital that they can invest in future innovation. And so then the question is, what does that future innovation look like, right? Over the past decade, if I just use as an example, like I rode for the first time, it was actually the day after I last saw you, I rode for the first time in a self-driving taxi, right? And, and I sent a video to my mom and she was like, that's crazy. Like, never in her lifetime she imagined like something like that would have existed. If you think of like the last decade, there's been just so much innovation. So the more companies have to invest in innovation, the more innovation happens, and then the world progresses. Now, what that looks like, we won't know. I was researching, what colleges, for my son recently using like AI. Maybe through that experience, I got access to research that actually, when I was applying to college, might have been very different, right? And as a result, it puts him on a path that is a different path that maybe he otherwise would have been on. We don't know what the possibilities are, but what we do know is if you look through history of time, whether it was the internet, whether it was mobile, whether it was social, like these things at a macro level have a net positive on society. All of them had negatives as well, right? There were early negatives of the internet. There's been negatives of social. There's been negatives of mobile. But generally speaking, we've managed through those. And that's the amazing thing about the world that we live in, is that we can, find ways to put this innovation to use and find, a more positive path. And so that's really kind of, from a more macro level, what we're focused on.
Okay, we need to ask some more spicy question now. So you mentioned that applying AI within the company for productivity is actually, the biggest thing come to your mind. Can you tell us, of course, everyone presumably use ChatGPT-like tools or some kind of the coding copilot or whatnot. What is the challenge you see that you think, oh, I would love to get more out of that, but I'm not getting enough of that from my employees, or either yet or at one point, but you sort of, we got over the hump. Can you give us some sort of your observations?
Yeah, I think one observation is that there's a natural resistance to change that exists. So if I just use, example of, I was using Neo recently, and occasionally I would like toggle back into my Chrome browser. And I was like, what am I doing here? I was like just doing something in Neo. Where am I? But that was like my habit. We've got some software engineers who are like, yeah, but I enjoy writing code. Like, yes, Claude could do that for me, but I actually enjoy like the mental stimulation that I get at work is actually solving these problems. And while I appreciate, it can do things, I actually enjoy doing that work, right? And so in some respects, by just automating what I enjoy, does it take some of the fun out of work? So I think there's like a change management aspect. There's a, kind of for lack of a better term, a dopamine type aspect where it's like, you feel good, the
So
stimulation that
basically,
gets provided.
based on your observation, it's not the technology that's in the way, it's the people's inertia, right?
Well, there is technology in the way too. So a good example of technology in the way, I think the most obvious example of technology in the way is what I would characterize broadly as like hallucinations, right? So for anyone who's used whether it's ChatGPT, one of these coding assistants, I believe it's net positive, but those hallucinations are frustrating. I was planning a business trip recently, and I asked ChatGPT to map out the routes of like what's the most efficient way to like map out these different cities that I was going to visit. And for some reason, it could not get its head around the fact that Madison, Wisconsin was only 2 hours from Chicago and really far away from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And it wanted me to do these convoluted routes to get to Madison, Wisconsin, which logically made zero sense, right? And so for me, it was like, wow, I'm spending a lot of time trying to convince, in this particular case, this particular chat interface, I'm spending a lot of time convincing it that, I should go to Madison, Wisconsin when I'm closer in Chicago than I will be in Ann Arbor, Michigan. At one point, is this actually a good use of my time? Like, am I actually more efficient just planning it myself? Right. And so in that sense, like the technology was actually getting in the way of my adoption. Now, my experience has been it's more net positive than net negative, that the efficiency is there. But for those who've spent time dealing with hallucinations, it can be pretty frustrating.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So there are, basically you're saying two things. One is the inertia is one of the biggest hurdle for, for AI to move forward, right? The example you give is switching from Chrome to Neo, right? It's sort of now in people's habit, right? This inertia might be the biggest hurdle in human mankind to move AI forward by not switching to Neo. So that's one example. But the other thing is hallucination is, still real, in your day-to-day thing. That's sort of if you see that there's a lot less hallucination, things would have been better, right? That's kind of the second thing you said. So we are kind of at the top of the 30 minutes. So I wanted to you share some advice to our, whether people who are sort of in, like professionals or even students or, in particular younger generations, right? I give you a data, just it sounds scary on the surface, but I have also my point of view. After you and I met, talked about this topic a few weeks ago, I saw a set of data. The data is basically if you look at the job openings for junior and senior people in the last several years, the growth has always been pretty, similar growth trajectory between junior and senior jobs, right? Until about 2 or 3 years ago, you see a, deviation between junior and then senior jobs, meaning that there's more growth in the senior jobs and then less or tapering off in the junior job growth. What does that mean? Based on your observation as a CEO of a tech companies, is that what you're expecting? What's the, whether that's your expectation or not? What's your advice to people, in the profession, field already, or, for people yet to come to, the tech world or the real world?
Yeah. Yeah, I think my advice is sort of two related things. So one is around embracing sort of the future. Like, someone said to me the other day, like, Phil, we're in an AI bubble. It's all going to come down. I said, at one point we're in an internet bubble, and I'm pretty sure the internet was much bigger than anyone expected it to be. Like, so, just because you read an article doesn't mean you should like be poo-poo on, what's going on right now. Like, this will be big. Embrace it, was my feedback to them. I think the second thing is, as it relates to just, kind of building your experience, getting into the job market, building your experience, a lot of it comes down to like skills. And I think there's sort of like, two kind of mindsets on skills. Like, one mindset is that 80% of the learning actually happens like through real world experience, right? It's not through reading books or taking a class or things like that. So at one point, you've got to get out there. It doesn't matter what you're doing, right? Much of my career has been in customer success. 100% of that experience the early experience around that was actually built not working for software companies, but like working in restaurants, right? So it's just like getting yourself out there, building experience, and then figuring out how you can apply that experience to continue to progress in your career. Definitely do the learning, right? The education. There's so many resources available, but also like the real world experience is what most employers actually value, right? It's not the certification, it's what you've done with it, or it's not the class, it's what you've done with it. So I think just like getting that real world experience, and then oftentimes as well, like some variety in that experience is like super critical. Economies are always going to ebb and flow. Through my career, I've seen no shortage of times when the economies went down, when job growth was kind of up, down, things like that. So that's always going to happen. But in many respects, it's always been up and to the right. If you look at things over history, including some pretty major revolutions. And this might be a major revolution in terms of like kind of what's going on, but always things have been up and to the right. And I think a lot of having the skills and experience, embracing the change is what's really critical.
So in particular for young generation, is STEM, computer science still useful? Should they skip college? Should they skip high school? Like what's in your mind?
Yeah, what's in my mind? Well, as a father who has 2 children in college, and also one who is applying to college, this is an area that's near and dear to my heart. And I just think about, first and foremost, a lot of their college education is more than just about what they learn in the classroom. So I think that's like, one thing. It's the relationships that they build. It's the out of classrooms experiences that they build, the life lessons that they build. So I think all this talk of like, skipping college is like crazy. The experience, like, yes, you could probably get all of the same academic content online these days, but that's different than like a college experience. And so I think you might have to look at it through a different framing. Paying for a $2,000 class that you could get the same experience online for free is very different than kind of what's the broader experience I'm solving for, through the college experience. And I think that's where some of the information out there is, kind of pretty misguided. I think the other thing too is like, I am a firm believer in investing in building skills that are practical and usable. I always think about, I was a math major, I always think about I should have been an applied math major, right? Like it was just, the more practical versus, theoretical application in my mind is, always important. But that being said, don't underestimate the importance of problem solving, the importance of being able to learn, the importance of communication, right? Like those things are really kind of important and valuable. And I'm pretty sure that when my parents were guiding me back then, they weren't saying like, Phil, you should change your major because the internet's coming. Like, or Phil, you should change your major because, this social thing that none of us even know about. Pretty sure my parents had a bag phone that was like physically attached to their car back then. Like, and so like the reality is we don't know what we don't know. And in some respects, what history has proven over time is that, that smart people can learn different technical skills, different job skills, but like the soft skills are the most important things to get right kind of earlier in your life. And that starts, out, in the earliest years of your life, but continues, to progress through your high school and college years. And like, if you're going to get anything right, just focus on getting those things right, because the other things, will come if you build the right soft skills and put yourselves in positions to learn.
So if I kind of summarize it from your point of view, you don't see major job elimination because of the technology, sort of the evolution or revolution.
Yeah, it'll be evolution. Like I think it's, it'll be evolution, right? Maybe jobs today, entry-level jobs, the new entry-level jobs in the future will look different, right? It'll be evolution for sure. That's why it's called change. Change will happen, but I think it's going to be more evolution than it'll be just, there was X number of jobs and now there's 50% of X.
Yep. So
yeah.
Actually, that's a very good phrasing. Evolution instead of elimination, right? That's kind of what I sort of the tone I heard.
Yeah, because there's like, if you think of AI today, like the success of AI is predicated on experts. All of those experts started out as entry-level people, like in jobs at one point, and over time became experts. If you eliminate those entry-level jobs, you will eliminate all future experts.
Actually, you and I talked about this
Yeah.
exact topic, right? the entry level person today, you know, they are going to be your major sort of the pillar in your company a few years from now. And I think you actually had a point of view because of AI, because of, you know, some of them, if they can learn AI fast or whatnot, they can be a better, you know, more major pillar of the company faster, right?
Yeah, that can have a bigger impact sooner.
Yeah.
Or you can have companies in parts of the world that we've never had companies before, right? Because it's enabled by AI. And then at a net level, that drives, you know, more from an economic perspective, not less, right? So there's still a lot of things we don't know, but I am generally bullish.
Yep. And I'll let Axel close off if he has more questions and for this show. But for full disclosure, he is applying to some of the, you know, top best schools, you know, in the world right now. So your advice is don't stop that process, continue, right? Okay, Axel, you all yours.
Yeah, I think that was super interesting. You're using AI to do some research on some colleges for your son. I'm sort of doing the same thing here. Definitely a big tool. And I just want to thank you so much for joining us today, and the rest of the individuals here. Feel free to welcome to come back next week. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Thank you,
I
Phil.
appreciate it.
Have a
It's
nice
great
week.
spending time with
Have a nice
everyone
weekend.
today.
yeah. See you.
Bye
All
bye.
right. Thank you.